And a pleasant good day to each and every one of you. Thank you for joining us here at the Information Command Center at the studios of GIS. Of course, you can follow us each and every day on the National Television Network. We also live on WVNT 93.5. Our topic for today, the COVID-19 pandemic and education, implications and opportunities. In a moment, I will introduce you to my guest, but first, the daily update on Saint Lucia's response to COVID-19. According to the Bureau of Health here in Saint Lucia, as of 12 noon, Saint Lucia has recorded a total of 18 positive confirmed cases of coronavirus. The number of persons that have recovered, 18. This means that all positive cases have recovered so far. The island has conducted 727 tests, and currently there are 289 persons in quarantine. On Tuesday, May 12th, we saw 20 more St. Lucians who are employees of Carnival Corporation being repatriated to St. Lucia. The Port Health Authority spearheaded the disembarkation, and the 20 individuals were transported to a government-operated quarantine facility where they will be housed for a period of 14 days. They will also be tested for COVID-19 during the quarantine period. And on May 12th, we celebrated our St. Lucian nurses. We're taking this report from Anicia Antoine on these celebrations.
In commemoration of International Nurses Day, the Ministry of Health and Wellness recognized the nurses of the Owen King AU Hospital, the Victoria Hospital, and the National Mental Wellness Center, and celebrated the contribution that they make to society. Deputy Permanent Secretary at the Ministry of Health and Wellness, Jenny Daniel, expressed her gratitude towards the nurses for all their efforts, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic.
We recognize that nursing is a tough job, and we recognize that it's an absolutely necessary job if we are to maintain health and wellness in St. Lucia. So in this regard, the ministry wishes to thank and congratulate all the nurses here today, both at all of our institutions as well as our primary healthcare centers, and to wish everyone happy International Nurses.
Executive Director at the Owen King EU Hospital and Victoria Hospital, Nancy Francis, highlighted the significance of the work being done by the nurses at the respiratory hospital and commended the nurses on the extra effort placed in administering their duties.
Today, as we honor them, we take this opportunity to serenade them in a very profound way while observing social distancing. We are now combating COVID, and everyone is involved in ensuring that we have zero deaths in St. Lucia. And today is very momentous for us because at the respiratory hospital so far we have zero deaths, and it is as a direct result of the hard work of our nurses. And today, on International Nurses Day, we, the management of the Owen King European Union Hospital and the Respiratory Hospital, congratulate and salute our nurses.
The recognition ceremony for International Nurses Day took place on Tuesday, May 12, 2020 at the Owen King EU Hospital. From the Government Information Service, I am Anicia Antoine reporting.
Thank you, Anicia Antoine, for that report. And indeed, our nurses are deserving of all of the accolades and praises being heaped upon them at this time. We take a break. When we come back, we'll be joined in studio by our guests.
In an effort to ensure patient and first responder safety, the Saint Lucia Fire Service has reviewed its patient transfer procedures, especially for patients with respiratory distress. Face masks will be provided. At no time during transportation should the face mask be removed. Please be patient and cooperative during this time to ensure you receive the best possible care while keeping our first responders safe.
And welcome back. Joining us today from the Curriculum and Materials Unit, CAMDU, of the Department of Education, Innovation and Gender Relations, we have with us Ms. Angel Caglin, Curriculum Officer for English Language, Selma Bissett, Curriculum Officer for Social Sciences, Kentilia Louis, Curriculum Officer for Theatre Arts. And today we'll be discussing the COVID-19 pandemic and education, implications and opportunities. Good afternoon, ladies.
Good afternoon.
And I must inform our listeners and our viewers that I found out that this is sort of a reunion, a 2 or 3 months reunion for you ladies. Haven't seen each other since the lockdown and the partial shutdown of the country. So welcome, and thanks to the Information Command Center, you're reunited today.
Thanks.
If only for a moment.
Yes.
Okay, first of all, let's start with each of you just introducing yourselves and a background as to what exactly that you do, what are your responsibilities within the CAMDU unit.
My name is Angel Caglin. I am the Curriculum Officer for English Language, so I'm responsible for language arts and literature. Literature at the secondary level and English language at both the primary and secondary levels. As with all of us, we are responsible for ensuring that the curriculum is implemented, that teachers they get professional development support in areas to implement the curriculum. Of course, to engage in our own training and own professional development. But generally, we are supporting teachers as they support their students.
Mm-hmm.
And I am Selma Bissett, Curriculum Officer for Social Sciences. This means that I have responsibility for social studies, geography, Caribbean history, and a recent addition we had to my portfolio was education for democratic citizenship. As Ms. Caglin indicated, it simply means that we are here to ensure that the curriculum is being enacted as was envisioned, that teachers are practicing some of the skills that each subject, because each subject has its own little nuances, so we have to ensure that these things are taken care of. But generally, as she said, it's just to lend support to the teachers wherever they need it. We are here to lend support to the teachers to ensure that instruction and learning is productive, is what it should be.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And yes, in terms of theatre arts, I lend support with dance, drama, culture, cultural forms, and of course what we call stagecraft, which is a lot of the technical areas. And this for now, it's in all the secondary schools, but we do have a few primary schools who have theatre arts programs in their schools. But of course, we know all the districts have cultural activities that happen throughout the year. And we want to make sure, especially in terms of education, at least there is some grounding in terms of cultural identity at all levels. So as has been said, I support that with activities, helping the teachers implement the syllabus when needed.
Mm-hmm. I've heard from all of you the phrase lending support. Mm-hmm. How has this been? What have been some of the challenges given all of the protocols during this COVID-19 experience in terms of lending that support, making yourself available to the teachers who you're supposed to be giving that support to?
I would say the biggest challenge is connecting with teachers, because when we're in the regular school system, we know exactly where the school is, where to find the teachers. But now you have to try to be creative as to how do you get through to teachers, how do teachers get to you if needs be. So communication is the biggest challenge as of now.
Mm-hmm. I would say another challenge is ensuring that we don't add to the stresses that teachers already have. Mm-hmm. It's very easy to overwhelm teachers with, resources. Everybody's making resources free online, and they may be getting, information from all sides. New demands are being placed on them, very different from what would be in the classroom setting. So we want to make sure that our support is actually supportive and not overwhelming, and acknowledging the challenges that they would have, that they're at home, that they are parents, that they have other family members and responsibilities to take care of. So I know for me, I temper my support a bit, because there is a lot in terms of literacy that can be shared, but I just want to make sure that we're responding to needs that they actually have.
I think in terms of my area, we had a little bit of the opposite because we are very culturally specific.
Yes.
And so what we found at this time was that getting material, readily available material that is connected to Saint Lucia or the Caribbean, you know, in some of the various areas, that was a little challenging. But what has come out of it is that now my teachers are creating their own videos and going into their archives because with the subject, we encourage a lot of interface with practitioners. So they all have little clippings somewhere and they're learning now to be producers.
But for something like theater arts, which is very interactive, very
Yes.
visual, I would imagine that on the one hand it will pose its own set of challenges, but also opportunities for creativity.
Yes, and if you look right now, let me just say this, one of the areas that is leading this, you know, pandemic is, of course, arts and entertainment. Everybody's looking to that. Everybody's creating videos and so forth. And of course, our students and teachers are involved in that as well. So one of the things I know the teachers have been doing with the students are the TikTok videos, creating radio dramas out of theater pieces, having rehearsals online and, you know, being innovative and finding different ways to still make sure that creative and performance element that is strong in their students is still being, you know, nurtured. So it is a challenging time, but as you said, it has allowed us to see how far we can stretch. And I think that is very important.
Ms. Bissett, you mentioned under social sciences the new aspect, education for democratic citizenship. Tell me a little more about that.
I'm happy you mentioned that because especially now we see the great need for such a subject in the curriculum. More than anything else, I think what COVID-19 has brought out is the need for us to go back to more of a skills, focus more on skills, right? We see, take for example, if the protocols, it required persons to think not of themselves, think of their neighbors, think of other persons in society, the healthcare workers. We saw the role of the police coming out very significantly. And how do people react to these things? How do we support each other? And education for democratic citizenship, what this subject does is that it allows persons, or it teaches persons skills that they would be able to live with each other in society, to be able to live with each other peacefully, to be able to respect each other's rights in a democratic society. And unfortunately, we've seen a lot of persons going against that and not seeing the importance of thinking about even their own family members and how such an illness can affect them. So even if I may be young, strong, and if I get COVID-19, I may be able to survive. But what about my grandmother out there? What about other persons practicing the hygiene, putting on your mask? Because people think that, well, it's my right to be able to wear what I want when I want, my right to be able to go to the river whenever I want, my right to be able to be outside as I want. But what we see is that with the rights come responsibilities. And right now we have the greater responsibility to think about the other person. And that is what education for democratic citizenship teaches us.
Well said. Testing vis-a-vis continuous assessment. This has been an age-old debate. Where are we in Saint Lucia when it comes to looking at testing, the formal testing in a classroom, vis-a-vis, like I said, a continuous assessment? And what is the experience of COVID showing us in light of this?
Well, I would say that our idea of standardized testing, it does have its place. It's necessary. As a Ministry of Education, you need to know how your students are doing at key stages. So at your grade 2 stage, your grade 4, grade 6, etc. That's important. However, continuous assessment or formative assessment is a practice that is ongoing. It has very, very many forms. We have been paying a little more attention in recent years to formative assessment and the role that it plays, not just in the classroom, but school-wide. And we see that for instance, at this time, it's not possible to have our MST exams, and considerations have to be made on how the grade 6 exam is going to be administered. Really putting together as a Department of Education a format or a program for assessment, for formative assessment, can actually help support the data that a ministry would get from standardized assessments. So having something similar to what the CPEA does, which is giving students specific tasks throughout the term that would contribute to a final grade, that is one of the aspects that would really help in a situation like this. But I think it's important for us to consider, when we have situations like this, what happens to students who may be leaving the primary school to go to the secondary school. So now it means that as a ministry, as assessment, as curriculum, we would now need to get together to discuss, what are the options, what are the possibilities, what would really help us understand what students can do. It's not just about a test, but it's about what our students can do and how we can help them move on from grade 6 to the secondary level. So that's a decision that, as a ministry, it's necessary for us to make.
I think in terms of continuous assessment, it's actually something that we do more than I think the public thinks, because everybody likes to focus on that end of term test, end of year test. But the end of year test is only one factor that is taken into consideration in terms of the development of the students. Especially in my subject area, we are about process, not product. Because what we, as Selma mentioned, it's a lot about skill development. I had a quote I shared with my colleagues. Education is not about the learning of facts, but the training of the mind to think. That's from Albert Einstein, and that's what we are about, training the mind to think. And so, with the continuous assessment, we do have that. We do have checkpoints, if you want to call it so. And it has been there before this. It will be here after that. As Ms. Caglin said, both are necessary. And with both of them, I think we can get as clear a picture as where our students are, so we can diagnose for them and know what it is we need to now focus to help them to become better citizens.
I want to add to that, to the importance of not just continuous assessment, but continuous feedback.
Yes.
Okay. And one of this situation has highlighted the importance of feedback, because right now we have many parents who are working with their children at home, and they're realizing, well, how do I know if my child is actually doing the right thing? How do I help them if they're doing the incorrect thing? How will the teachers know what is being done, what's not being done? And we tend to focus, in our society, we tend to focus on just the scores. The child does this test and the child either passes or fails. And then after that, we and I'm speaking generally as a society, we don't go back and say, okay, well, this is where you need to improve. This is what you need to do better. And right now, it's been highlighted for us that we really need to focus on giving the students continuous feedback, because it is that feedback that is going to allow the child or assist the child to be able to improve, even if not this term or next term. Even myself, now that I am doing homeschooling with my nephew and my son, I'm seeing there are things that as a student way back in primary school that I did not understand, and now I am able to, because of what he's doing and seeing the feedback, I am able to learn through that. So even later down the road, that feedback can help you to be able to finally get it.
But it's important, it's interesting you mentioned the feedback and the scores, but how do you see that perception changing over time? The focus not being solely on scores and numbers and what have you, but like you said, the continuous assessment of the child, getting that feedback as to where a child is at various levels of their development.
Well, I wanted to jump on what Ms. Bissett was saying about feedback. Normally, the end of term and the end of year tests, there are a lot of times to be able to provide a report, right, to parents, so that parents can see, okay, how did my child do for the 3 months that they were at school or for the entire year? And that usually comes in the form of a score. But we all know that a mark, a score, does not tell you, you know, everything about a child, let's say in language arts. However, as Ms. Louis mentioned, there are checkpoints, you know, even while the child is at school. So it's possible for parents to get to know what those checkpoints are. So we can adjust the way that reports are given, for instance. Qualitative reports are just as useful, or maybe even more useful than a quantitative report, which is a score. So it's possible for parents to see, okay, in language arts, what are some of the skills that my child at the grade 2 level should be able to do? So what should they be able to read? How should they be able to write by that stage? You know, what kind of vocabulary should they have? And to find out, okay, how is my child doing in those specific areas? And then how can I, you know, further support that at home by speaking with my child and things like that. So it is possible for us to adjust, you know, the way we give feedback to parents. So Ms. Bissett was talking about feedback to students so that they can continue learning. But parents also want some kind of feedback and some kind of report. So it's possible for us to break down, you know, what does that score actually say about what the child does? And some children make progress, you know, during the term that may be just as valuable as what the score says at the end of the term.
I just want to add to that. When you talk about the score and what's the point of that score and how can we break that, one of the trends you see right now, and it's to help parents to have that understanding, a lot of employers are actually not only taking into consideration if did this person coming to me get all ones and so forth, but what kind of skills are they bringing? Because the skills are the most important parts. Okay, facts, yes, you can brush up on facts, and facts change. You know, a few years ago we had 9 planets. Now we don't have 9 planets anymore. But right now, according to experts have said, we are training our students for a future we are not sure what it's going to look like. Ken Robinson says it very clearly. Therefore, we talk about the 21st century skills that our students need. So I think we need to maybe help parents especially to understand that it's not just about that end score, but it's about your child's development, where they're in terms of their skill development, where they're in terms of their, when I say skills, I'm talking about social, cognitive, all of those skills.
I was about to bring that in, based on the subject you mentioned earlier on, because you will have to look at person's social behavior as well. That is a very important factor.
Very important.
Ms. Louis, I would not leave here today without zoning on theatre arts for just a moment. What is something that has bothered me personally over the years is in terms of the way we look at things like theatre arts within the education system, almost as a sidebar or some alternative subject. How close are we to seeing it being considered, quote unquote, a real subject?
Well, it is a real
I know I've started you off.
Yes. But let me just say this, because I believe I'm a bit of a functionalist. I believe everything, you know, has its purpose. And I think COVID has shown the importance of the arts and entertainment industry, because right now that is the industry that is thriving. Every other industry might have problems with, you know, closures and so forth, but persons are producing. Now you are seeing, online battles between various singers. Persons are having concerts online. They're having performances online. The artists right now, contrary to popular belief, are the ones right now thriving.
And not only thriving, they're actually keeping us alive.
Keeping us alive, keeping us sane, keeping us, you know, focused. So part of the problem in the past has been, and I've talked to many parents, and they always say, is there a future in this for my child? Will my child make a living? Well, right now, we are realizing that these are the things that are helping, these areas, as I said, the ones that are growing. And again, let me just say that in terms of theatre arts, all the skills, or the main skills that they develop, are critical thinking skills, innovation and creativity, which is needed in every area. So you may not end up being, as you say, an actor, but then those skills you've learned, how to work with persons, how to deal with problem solving, you know, that's a big area. How do I put this together for this, that, and this, with these limited resources? Those things, those skills are what are going to ensure that we thrive and we prosper.
And you're right.
Can I just add to that? I want to support that 100% for a few reasons, a few understandings that I've had myself. We have always thought that the aim of learning, and you know, down to reading, is just to understand. But that's not the case. You know, the ultimate goal of learning anything is to be able to create. And that's what we really want our students and our teachers to do. Think about Bloom's taxonomy. Where is comprehension and application on the taxonomy? That's the lower levels.
Yes.
The ultimate, the new taxonomy puts creation at the top over evaluation. Right? What we need now are content creators. Let's go back to what Ms. Lee said at the beginning, that, you know, the challenge for theater arts was that there was a lot of content and culturally and linguistically relevant content. Yes. Now we're getting a bit more of that. And in every subject area, whether it's social sciences, science, natural sciences, language, music, the ultimate goal is for humans to be able to take what they have learned, apply it, but so that they can create. So theater arts is extremely important in that case. In fact, one of the ways we ask for our students to demonstrate their understanding of you know, content and skills is for them to engage in performances, you know, in language arts, in science, in social studies, in history doing a reenactment. That requires, you know, the skills that theater arts would teach. Me as a writer producing a script or even a piece of poetry, that means nothing just on the paper unless it gets to an audience. So we really have to understand the connection among all of these subject areas. And what most of us focus on is content. But what we really want is to bring that content off pages, off children's minds, let our people stop being just consumers, but actual creators.
Producers,
you know, and producers.
And to add to that too, I think one of the things that will come out of this situation, we'll see that there needs to be a thrust towards self-employment. We cannot just rely on other persons being responsible for our employment. Because what have we seen? When something happens and those persons cannot sustain their businesses, even government now, we're seeing your government job is not as secure as it used to be. So what we want persons to see, and I want to just sidestep for a little and see that the curriculum is as important as the society deems it to be important. Many of those subject areas, the theater arts, the music, even the Caribbean history, those subjects, persons do not deem them to be important because our regular traditional jobs, they don't need these things. Okay, I can argue that, but that's the thing, right?
But so again, when you say persons, among those persons sometimes are the very teachers who supposed to be
very teachers,
again, when you look at things
like persons.
You've had areas like home economics, clothing and textiles, which were again considered, you know, down there. But again, look what's happening now with, you know, our chefs, our cooks, persons making the masks, the clothing and textiles. Those subjects.
But not just teachers, parents who are supposed to be the educated persons, the thinking persons, and so on. And what you're seeing is that they put those subjects on the side, but I'll take for example, as it's reading month and the schools are asking persons to they're posting videos. And I saw this video of this little girl from Laquamingo it is. And I'm looking at this child, and people might be saying, wow, this child can read well. But I'm not even thinking of the reading. Look, this child is a great actor. This child can connect with an audience. This child can thrive in a situation where the child is in the arts. But persons are going to think, wow, this child can read well. This child could be a lawyer. She could be a doctor. She could be, you know, and these things. But they're not seeing that this child has a unique skill that when we are in such a situation, that skill is going to single this child out. And this child can, when everybody is suffering, this child can have something to fall back on, right? When others are struggling.
I just want to add one more thing to what you are saying in terms of the arts and their role in this and how they're seen. I've always said St. Lucians are very creative and we are natural, and it's a human condition. And whenever we have to connect to ourselves, like in times like this with trauma, we go back to the arts always. Now you're seeing people writing poems, writing stories, posting on Facebook and everywhere their personal story. They're becoming storytellers. They're singing songs. They're going back to that. It is a part of our identity. And so this idea that we don't need it, now when we are stripped down to the basics, we are realizing how important it is to keep us focused, to keep us sane, you know, when everything else in the world is changing and in a state of flux.
And it's not just that. I want to add the element of literature.
Yes.
You know, it's a subject that, you know, that persons think very few people can do, and in a lot of the schools it's dying. But I'll tell you, the time period that we're going through right now, most of us may not see it again in our lifetime. It's not a happy occasion, but it's a different occasion. It's momentous. Do you know who's going to capture it? It's going to be captured by writers. It's going to be captured by poets, by musicians, by persons who can wield a camera, by persons who can speak and tell a story. These are the persons who are going to capture this. And, you know, we can think about all the art being created now as a virtual time capsule, that maybe the next pandemic that may hit, whether it's 50 years, 30 years, whatever, we should be able to look back and say, okay, well, this is what happened in the education system. These were some of the good things that came out of it. This is what happened in our economy, right? And all of these things actually requires skills that persons may not think, you know, they may be focused on the academic skills, on the academic knowledge, in fact, and not so much the skills. But I also wanted to go back to what Ms. Bissett said about how curriculum is created. And we have been paying very close attention to not just education. As educators, we are supposed to pay attention to every aspect of society. Because where our economy goes in the next few years, that is where education has to come in to prepare persons for those economies, which is why we need some serious, clear-cut answers on what it is we're going to be doing with the economy in St. Lucia. What are some of the areas that they've mentioned that, you know, young persons can invest in? And we don't want to think about grand investments. We want to think about what can persons who are going to be leaving school, what can persons who are in school begin doing to add to the economy? Because that's where we are now going to say, okay, now we have to design instruction and learning so that students can begin practicing those skills from the school level. If it's agriculture for subsistence so that we can have within our country, then we need to get our students to have a new understanding of what agriculture is. It's not about getting your fingers, you know, in the soil all the time. That's just one part of it. You know, is it music? Do we need more persons who can, you know, capture what's happening? Look at Creole. Is Creole any more important now? I mean, we have our news updates in Creole. Did we have that before? Should we maybe consider every station that gives the news should have an English and a Creole report? You know, so all of these questions are coming up, and you know what, this is the perfect time to jump on it and seize the opportunities and begin doing those things.
Okay, so that having been said, let's zone in on the topic now, the implications and the opportunities. I know for you, you've been reading up on the digital economy. We'll discuss that on another program. But let's look at the implications and the opportunities that COVID-19 have posed.
Okay, I will start. For me, one of the things that I have loved the most out there, and persons will be saying, what's there to love about COVID-19? But a sore point in the education system has been that gap between home and school. We see school as school, home as home. And there was not, most teachers, principals will tell you, the parental aspect of it, the parental support is lacking. Not for everybody, but we're saying generally. But this situation has helped to bridge that. Maybe not necessarily in exactly the way it should have been bridged, which is something we have to evaluate and look at, because many parents have been thrust into the role of teacher. And we were not prepared for it. So we know we would have made some missteps and so on, so we have to think about it. But now we're seeing parents are actively involved in the education of their child. They can actually tell you, well, my child has difficulty with the phonics, my child has difficulty with number concepts. Before, many parents would not have been able to tell you exactly what the problem is with their child. So that is one of the things that I see coming out of that. We need to find a way to maintain that, not allow that opportunity to just go by and forget about it, and see how we can keep that connection between home and school. Most teachers now have WhatsApp groups with their parents. There's continuous communication, and they are on the ball. They know exactly, parents can tell you, take for example, even you would think as somebody in the education system that I would know exactly, but I was working with my son, and they were doing the phonics, the vowel sounds, and so on. And then when the short sound and the long sound comes up, for example, the word give, and my son spelled it G-E-V-E. And then I had to message the teacher and say, but Miss, how do you help the child to distinguish between those sounds, right? And then I learned, well, in grade K, right now, they just need to know is it the long sound? No, now I'm confused. Yeah. The short sound. The short sound. So where the long sound comes up, we tell them about it, but it's not important for them to really know it so much at this point. Okay? So now I know exactly what my son should know. And then I can tell you, yes, he knows this. So we can work on something else. As opposed to now, I made them, prior to that, I had gone into a whole lesson on long sound, short sound. And then I'm like, oh my God, I hope I didn't do something wrong, to affect that teacher later on. But that's a kind of thing that I love, and I hope that continues, that we are able to. So something as simple as parents knowing these are the areas my child will be working on for the week. These are the things they're supposed to know, and then I would be able to check for myself. Yes, he knows it, no. And that goes back to the feedback. And so when the score comes at the end of the term and you get the report book, yes, you got these wrong, but I know that in other situations you have gotten it correct. So I know it's not, you totally don't know this. It may just be this example in the exam that you did not know, but I know that you have some knowledge of that concept, of that topic. And then it's less of a blow. Oh my God, my child failed. It might just be this exam, my child failed, but that does not mean that my child does not know.
And even that homeschool connection will actually help with how parents support their children. We're not expecting parents to be teachers, but we want parents to see that, things that you do in the home, we have the impression that there are things that children do and things that, adults do in the home. But can we involve children in things like chores? Can we involve them in things like looking at the family budget, looking at our past spending, take our massy bills, our receipts, look at what we've been spending on, what are essential, what are non-essential, how can we create a list based on this particular budget? If there's gardening to be done, looking at, what are we going to use this plot of land to do? Can we do composting? How do we go about doing composting? But for teachers, the homeschool connection will take on a little different nuance, because what we now give children for homework, it's not going to be do questions 1 to 3 or do questions 1 to 10. It will now be, we learned about leaves and so on, and we learn about the life cycle of whatever it is. When you go home, what about your home, or where in your home can you, apply this? Is it in helping your parent to create a kitchen garden? So, normally the children have to bring a bean to school and put it in the, maybe they can see this happening, right outside their home. So really looking at how we give homework now, it's not just about go and do more of what you did in the class, but how did what we do in the class, how did it now apply to your home life? So that's one way that the homeschool collection.
I agree with that. I think now the application of what happens in the classroom in the home setting, in the social setting, is something we're going to see an increase in. Because now, a lot of what Ms. Caglin mentioned there, it's more of a project-based approach. That's what we are looking at. Because now the students are at home, what can they do there on their own with assistance or guidance from their parents, where they can now look at, okay, how do I analyze what the teacher told them? Break it down, go through, as we said, the higher order skills. And then now you have a product that you now are responsible for, that now you are more in control of your own learning. Yep. I think that is something we're going to see and going forward. And not saying that some of what we had before is not going to still be there, because you need both, But I think that is something that we recognize really seems to be working right now. And I think now both all teachers, parents, and students understand, because it's already there. A lot of what we're talking about, these are things that we've been talking about forever. But now COVID kind of has forced us to implement them, in speed through them more than anything else.
And that actually brings us to another implication. We have different kinds of students. We have students not just different in terms of their interests and their abilities, but also circumstances. So one of the conversations we were actually having earlier was this balance between students who are now thriving through online learning, right? That's one. But I also want to address another issue that's very, very, it's something that touches us all the time. Catering to student needs. We have special education students. Now, when we hear special education, we're probably just thinking about, a child who is physically disabled, or a child who has autism or Down syndrome. But there are students who are in the regular classroom who also have special needs. It could be that they have dyslexia. They could have some attention disorder. All of our special education students now, one of the implications is that we have to consider how seriously and how directly we are making arrangements for these students to learn, outside of a classroom. What do all of these children have access to some form of support for learning, whether it's online or whether it's with someone who will be contacting them to help them get through their learning? As we're designing work for students to now use or to now apply on their own, are we using the right strategies and the right resources and tools so that these children can actually, accomplish what they're doing on their own? Of course, we're making efforts based on our circumstances. But in terms of access for our students, we need to consider, how do we use our, all of the corporate partners who are jumping on board now? I mean, we're very happy to have them, but we want them beyond a pandemic or a disaster situation. We want to see how we can make sure that everybody actually has access to internet. How do we ensure that as many people as possible have access to, devices? But connected to that is not just the device. I can have a phone and it can be totally useless if I don't have the skills to use it. And if we don't have, as we mentioned, the content, relevant content, to put on there. We will not solve all the problems of the world. We'll not solve all the problems of the education system, but we have to see what it is we can do to make sure that there's access.
Yeah, I think, let me just jump on what you just said there. One of the things we will see coming out of this is more content. Culturally relevant content, because now, as I said, teachers are now forced to create videos, find local examples for various things. Parents now have become, researchers as well as the students, and you're getting all of this information. And as much as there are the YouTube channels and so forth, there are also copyrights where that is concerned. There's, you know, our access and our use of some of those services they're not as readily available, and they may be right now, but what happens afterwards? This is a time for us to create our own, you know, so that when children need to see themselves, children need to see persons who speak like them, look like them, behave like them, that helps with the learning. And I think that's one of the things that we're going to see increase coming out of this, the content.
Which is why I was happy when you mentioned under social sciences, you spoke about the Caribbean history. So I'm hoping also in terms of talking about the content, that we get more content with our Saint Lucian history as part of the wider Caribbean history.
Yes. And I cannot leave here without stressing the big implication that we have to see the relevance of subjects like social studies, education for democratic citizenship. Too often we focus on the solely academic, we focus on the, sorry Miss Caglin, just, you know, the English language, the mathematics. These subjects are always the first, you know, especially just before, and that's the system has set it up that way. It's no one person's fault, okay? But it's easy. Let's you know, social studies, it's easy, it's nothing. Let's do a lot. Persons send their students to lessons for English language, mathematics, those things. Anytime we have a little issue, okay, we can move this subject. But more than anything, we saw the importance of the social skills.
So could we agree here today that after today, we'll put a ban on the term extracurricular activities in the school? Could we agree going forward
well, it depends on
terminology will no longer
we can
be
say
used?
we agree with you, but I cannot tell you what other people
in reference to some other subject areas like theater, arts, and sports.
Well, you see, I would say it depends on what you call extracurricular. None of these subjects are extracurricular.
Yes, but we've heard of them being referred to as such in some circumstances.
So
let's call them non-traditional, you know,
I don't
subjects or something like that.
They shouldn't
just subject areas.
They're equally important.
Subject areas.
You know, and Miss Bissett says, sorry, Miss Caglin, but no, Miss Caglin would be one of the first persons to tell you everything does not need to be English language. You know, every company who wants to do something in the education system, it's usually, let's get the students to write an essay. But I put it to you, let's get students to create a video. You know, are they still going to have to use the same language arts skills? Yes. And that's one thing. Oh, now that I am on camera, let me say it. Language arts is not content. Language arts are skills. To be able to read, to write, to speak, to listen, to view, to graphically represent. These are all skills. So there's no content. You know, what's a noun? How important is it for you to tell me the definition of a noun right now? Not very important, but it's very important for you to understand it if you have to read to understand and if you have to write. So this is what language arts is, and that's why I always encourage, let's incorporate those skills in other content areas, in areas that actually have content. So the one of the main things we want to understand is that language arts is not just about writing and reading. There is so much more happening here. And like Ms. Bissett says, she cannot leave without saying some things. I cannot leave without emphasizing how important the Creole is. I know I am the curriculum officer for English language, but I consider myself the curriculum officer for language. So modern languages.
Can you say that in Creole?
Mais assuré. Moi pas just là pour oui, moi pas just là pour anglais, moi là pour toute langue nous ni. Right? And we want to help our students, our children who are coming in with home languages that are not just standard English. Not many of us grew up speaking standard English, which by the way is just a dialect of English. We want to embrace the other languages, the Creole English and the French Creole as well. So I will stop here because I can go on all day about
Just some final thoughts from all of you. Recommendations for our teachers and our students at this time.
Well, my message would be Teachers, you are doing fantastically well. You are doing something that you were never prepared to do. Let's keep thinking globally and not think, the micro things that we have to do in our subject. Always ask yourself, why are we getting students to do this? What can they learn that will benefit them right now in a COVID pandemic? And for our education system, we're really looking forward to getting together with all our specialists and discussing, looking at all those elements and seeing what we can now improve, what we can include, what we can adjust in our system.
What the advice I would give would be to look at how we can make the curriculum relevant to what is going on right now. And I'm not just speaking of COVID. Relevant as in terms of the circumstances where we live, what we are doing in the home, what we have to do when we go out, all of those things. If teachers, parents, students just think about what is it that I'm doing now and how can I reinforce what I've learned in school, I think we'll be okay. That's the important thing right now. Because as we can see, when something occurs, when we have a crisis, when we have a situation, it's COVID today, the hurricane season is coming up, it might be a disaster. We have to make what we learn in school work for us in whatever situation that we are in. So instead of just looking at, okay, the students need to know this, whatever, just think about what they're doing. Okay, they're going to be doing chores. They're going to be washing dishes, they're going to be cooking, they're going to be taking care of their siblings. How can I use those things to reinforce what I've learned? As a parent too. So while they're cooking, let's count. What color, okay, what color is this for the early learners? Let's count the number of items we need. While we're washing, how do we conserve water now with the drought? Water conservation. So what can we do to conserve water? If we waste too much water, what is going to happen? When we go out, look at the importance of taking turns. Okay? Why we should not only be staying, having reasonable distance because of COVID. That's one thing I hope and pray remains. That we go out and we can form a line and we can not be in somebody's personal space.
Quintilla might tell you it's not culturally normal to be that way.
Well, I hope culture is dynamic, culture
yes.
And I hope that will be our new culture. Okay, so that's the advice I would give to them. Let's make it work for you as an individual, not just thinking about just the whole school thing. How is this working for me and my family?
Well said, Quintilla.
I think, and let's go back to the culture of school. I know right now a lot of persons are anxious. There's a lot of anxiety out there. You have to remember, and we were discussing that we are accustomed of waking up at a certain time, doing subjects. Then you are told when to have your break, when to do this, when to do that, and you know what your day is like. And right now, I know, I've heard from parents, but I feel as though my children are not getting enough work. It's not all about work. As we said, take this time to experience these different ways of learning. Let there be breaks. The breaks are important. And the breaks are not, when I say breaks, from, okay, let me learn this, what did the teacher say to do? Have the discussions. This is a good time to bring in that. Saint Lucians love to talk. This is a time to have the discussions, talk to each other. We go back to that time period when we used to come together at the end of the day and talk about what our day was like, what we learned and all. And these are the things, interestingly, around the world you see coming up, that sense of community. It is important because those are the things that are going to help us to survive this in a way that, as I said, we can thrive and we can prosper. Those skills that were there before, let's go back to them. The Kudme spirit, let's help each other out. And when I say that, I'm talking about also teacher and parent. Have a conversation, help. It's both of us together, all of us together in this learning environment, trying to ensure that we produce the best citizens possible.
Well said.
We say all in.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you, ladies, for a wonderful discussion here today. I suspect we're going to have a part 2 of this reunion. We've been discussing education in the midst of COVID, the implications and opportunities. To all our viewers and listeners, we say thank you once again and continue to stay tuned to the Information Command Center right here at the studios of GIS. Continue to be safe, continue to obey all of the protocols, and I've been saying together we're going to get through this.